And what a pleasure to welcome Guillaume Pitron, journalist, author, filmmaker, and rare metals expert. And he's with me on the set. Hello, Guillaume.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm very good, and you?
I'm great. I'm very excited to have this discussion with you today. I've read your book. So in 2018, you published The War on Rare Metals, The Hidden Side of Energy and Digital Transition. When do you have time to write?
Actually, that's my first job. I mean, that's my main occupation. So I find time to write from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Fantastic.
I can live on what I write.
You're
that's
lucky.
Good. I mean,
I never have time to write. I don't know. I'm always impressed. So, Guillaume, to get back into our topic, so increasingly we're hearing a lot about challenges relating to rare earths and cobalt in hybrid and electric vehicles. So, do the same problem to affect combustion engine vehicles? I'm speaking about the existing fleet.
Actually, the existing fleet is also made of metals. If you take an oil car, you can find in an oil car manganese, you can find aluminium, steel, copper. You also find critical metals, which are so-called criticals because there are risks of supply shortages, which have been identified notably by the European Union. And you may find in an oil car a critical metal like magnesium, which is being used for making the seats of the car lighter. And you also find other critical minerals that are really specifically used for oil cars, notably in the catalytic converters. And in the catalytic converters, you will find metals like rhenium, rhodium, palladium, iridium, platinum. So as you can see, the rare metals and the critical metals issue is not only about hybrid and 100% electric, it's also, in a less extent, but still about all cars.
So we don't realize it. There are so many metals in the cars. We always think about plastic and other components. And surrounding the rare metals, there are some geopolitical stakes. So what are the stakes behind rare metals?
So you find rare metals in an oil car. I mean, for example, you may find them in wipers, in mirrors. It's small motors that are electric, and they use a couple of grams of rare earths in each of these electric components. You find also rare earths in the screens of a car, whether it's hybrid, electric, thermal car. You will find these rare earths in the colors of the screens. For example, you need europium for the red color. I think you will need terbium for the green color of the screens. And these rare earths are very strategic because they are being extracted in China. 60% of the extraction comes from China. 80 to 90% of the refining comes from China too. So what is being extracted outside of China goes to China for refining. And we are dependent, we Western countries, on these supplies, on resources which are extremely strategic and for many different usages.
And this can create lots of issues in the supply.
It will definitely create some issues. And, let me talk, for example, about palladium, which is one of the components of the catalytic converters. Palladium is being today produced mostly in South Africa, but also in Russia. 37% of the world production of palladium comes from Russia. And against the backdrop of what's going on right now, what's going to happen with our imports of palladium, which is absolutely critical for catalytic converters. Today, it's still going on. I mean, we're still
very dependent on some economies. This is what you're saying?
Exactly, such as Russia, for example, for this specific critical metal. But because, there has not been any, stop of export of such metals, we keep receiving the palladium from Russia. But what's going to happen tomorrow? Maybe if the situation gets worse, maybe we're going to have to turn to other producers for finding this palladium, which is so important
in the car component. So we were speaking about the existing fleet, obviously. So what's the impact of the trend towards all connected vehicles? What can you say about that?
Well, first I want to say that by 2025, we will find in the world 500 million connected cars. And every car today is connected in one way or another, every new car. Whether it's an oil car, whether it's a new...
Not just the new generation,
car,
not just the new generation, you're
mostly
saying.
the new generations, which are getting more and more even
Connected.
sometimes autonomous.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't make much a difference whether it's an electric car or a pure oil car. They will be, and they are more and more connected. But that means that you will have to get much more computers into the car to actually collect the data from the car itself and also connect the data from, surrounding cars, from connected bridges, connected roads, connected fire lights, in order to help the car to actually understand its environment. So these are more and more rare metals. Plus, this data which is being collected and received by the car, some of this data is getting actually stored in data centers, in servers outside of the car, in all this infrastructure that we call internet. And these servers need, rare metals. And for connecting the servers to the electric grid, you need fiber optic and you need copper cables. So there is no such thing as an autonomous car. The more you want an autonomous car, the more you need to make it actually dependent upon an infrastructure that's all around, which is made of these freaking metals. So we're never going to get out of it. Actually, the more we accelerate, the more we get modern,
that's interesting.
the more we need these resources.
So that's interesting. I'm going to take that word from you. There's no such thing as autonomous vehicle.
Exactly,
Actually, it's they need all those rare metals actually to become autonomous. This is something people don't know about.
The more it's dependent upon supplies and upon an infrastructure that.
And we're putting a lot of pressure then on those demands on those metals.
Well, definitely yes, but the International Energy Agency has calculated that for respecting the Paris agreements, by 2040, we're going to have to extract 42 times more lithium than what we extracted in 2020, and 7 times more rare earths. So, this post-carbon world is a metals world, is a metallic world, and we really need, in the general public, to get a sense of that.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't see that from that perspective, but we spoke about recycling earlier with our guest. So do the same recycling challenges like we discussed previously apply to these components?
Sure. So you will meet many recycling challenges with oil cars, obviously. For example, how do you recycle palladium? Palladium, which is once again this component of catalytic converters. But actually, palladium is an expensive metal, so it's more easy to recycle because it's competitive enough to have the secondary material recycled rather than the primary material which gets out of the mine. So today we recycle 60 to 70% of the world production of palladium. Then you may find lots of recycling challenges around the recycling of the component of an electric car battery, for example, and also the rare earth magnets of 90% of the electric cars running today in the world. And that's going to be a very high challenge because you need to disalloy the alloy. You need to separate them. Have you ever tried to recycle a mayonnaise?
Not me, no.
You don't want to recycle a mayonnaise. You want to separate the egg from the olive oil from the salt. It's just impossible.
It's tough.
That's
Impossible
the
to do
same
that.
issue with a neodymium iron boron engine from an electric car. How do you disalloy these metals that have been mixed together?
Melted and mixed together.
You can make it, but expensive. It's time consuming. It's energy consuming. It's much less expensive to go back to the mine.
Interesting.
So for economic reasons, we have this challenge of making the secondary material as competitive as the primary material, and that's going to be a huge challenge for the coming decades in a post-oil world.
Wow. Guillaume, I would like to have a piece of your mind on one of the statements made by Thierry Breton. You heard the European Commissioner, who was really speaking about the north-south divide. So if we look at what's happening here in Europe, it's not very relevant what's happening elsewhere in the South in Africa, for example. What can you say about that?
Yeah, we keep having a perspective on the fact that we're going to stop selling oil cars in Western countries and Europe by 2025 for Norway, 2030, 35, 2040. But what Thierry Breton meant in the French Senate 2 weeks ago was to say, but it's not because you're going to stop you French producers or German producers, automakers, are going to stop selling these cars to Europe, that you're going to stop selling them to some other parts of the world. The energy transition in Africa is taking much longer. You don't have this network of battery recharging stations. So basically, he was saying, don't misunderstand that you will keep after 2040 producing oil cars. That's not going to that doesn't mean that it's going to be for the French consumer. It's going to be for the African consumers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you see, it's not the end from one day to one another of the oil car, whether we want it or not. That's the true reality is that some of the countries and other parts of the world are taking more time to move towards the energy transition.
Especially in this industry, you can't leapfrog, at least not for Africa. Don't you think we are like some kind of shifting our problems somewhere else?
I definitely think so. I've been working on this issue of rare metals, which is a fascinating issue for the last 10 years. And the more we get into this new post-world era, the more we realize that we need strategic, rare, critical, and even abundant metals. We need more copper, which is not rare metals, but we need 4 times as much copper in an electric car comparing to an oil car. And we discover, as we extract them more and more, new ecological issues. We discover new economic issues. How are we going to produce the batteries on our own and not depending upon gigafactories in China? We discover geopolitical issues. How are we going to secure these strategic minerals in countries with which we don't have necessarily the same values, democratic values? So we really have to consider that this is probably not a way to solve a problem, but to move it from oil fields to mining areas. And this is why we need to really be working actively on circular economy, recycling, and other things, to be less dependent as much as we can on these resources.
Yeah, speaking about recycling, we spoke about that earlier. We mentioned also energy transition in relation to our car fleet earlier. So what about rare metals? What would be the impact?
For the new
generation of cars.
Sure. Well, it's going to be huge. Once again, the International Energy Agency has tried to forecast our uses of such metals for the next 20 years. And the needs for lithium will be multiplied by 42. The needs for graphite and cobalt will be multiplied by 17 or 19. Need for rare earths will be multiplied by 7 to 9. So it's just huge what's going on. Even copper, we're going to have to need more copper, even if it's not a rare metal specifically. So here are the needs that we have to face. Who's going to extract these resources? Will Western countries let the poor countries let the resources getting extracted somewhere else in order to enjoy the best added value of these metals? How are we going to take our share of these real impacts that we'll have to face at some point?
So that's a real question. So you asked it yourself, can the industry here in Europe actually secure sufficient supplies of rare metals to cover all its needs?
We will not.
We will not.
It's impossible.
And the real question is it a good thing? So that's another story.
Oh, we can talk about it. But first, we will not, because we don't have necessarily sufficient resources for our own needs. I don't think we have sufficient rare earths or
So we need to find alternatives.
And when we have the resources, the problem is that we have enough lithium. We have so much lithium for our needs. But the thing is, do we want to extract lithium? Are the people, the citizens, the consumers, ready to understand that to drive greener, we're going to have to dig deeper? And especially in your backyard, not in someone else's backyard.
You're right.
And people are not ready to accept that. And social acceptation of the mines will be a tough thing. So I believe even if we can for the metals, we won't. And we have to listen to Philippe Varin, who is a French industrial who produced a report that was meant to be given to the Élysée, to the French President of the Republic, and also to the Ministry of Ecology a couple of weeks ago. And he was very clear, saying that by 2030, but Europe would not be able to produce more than 30 to 20% of its needs for nickel, lithium, and cobalt. So the difference, we're going to have to get it from somewhere. And this is where the geopolitics of the green, the geopolitics of the electric car sometimes.
That's right. Very insightful, Guillaume. We could speak for longer. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you for your time. It was great having this chat with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.